Apologies from Deputies Maher Devine and Senator Lynn Rowan. I am delighted to open this 8th public meeting of the Joint Committee on Drugs Use, our second in the Education, Youth and Prevention module. In today's meeting, we'll be discussing substance use and young people. I'd like to welcome our witnesses from Belong To, Miss Brenda Kelly, Drug and Alcohol Senior Youth Worker, and Miss Carmel Walsh, Director of Youth Services. From the National Youth Council of Ireland, Mr Mick Ferron, the CEO, and Miss Rachael Treanor, National Youth Health and Programme Manager. And from the Canal Community's Local Drugs and Alcohol Task Force, Miss Leanne Maher, Drug Education Worker. You're all very welcome. Before we begin, I'm just going to read a note on privilege. All witnesses and members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice that you should not criticise or make charges against any person or entity by name or in such as ways to make him or her identifiable or otherwise engage in a speech that might be regarded as damaging to the good name of the person or entity. Therefore, if your statements are potentially defamatory in relation to an identifiable person or entity, you will be directed to discontinue your remarks. It is imperative that you comply with any such direction. I'd also like to remind members of the constitutional requirements. In order to participate in public meetings, members must be physically present within the confines of Leinster House complex. Members of the committee attending remotely must do so from the precincts of Leinster House. This is due to the constitutional requirement that in order to participate in public meetings, members must be physically present within the confines of the place where Parliament is chosen to sit. In this regard, I would ask any member partaking via Microsoft Teams that prior to making their contributions to the meeting that you confirm that you are on the grounds of the Leinster House campus. So I'm going to invite our witnesses to deliver your opening statement to the committee in a moment, and I'll follow that. I'll call on members to put their questions to the witnesses. All statements have been circulated to members and will be published on the Oireachtas website after the session is agreed. We will be limited opening statements to 5 minutes to allow plenty of time for questions and answers. I'm conscious that a wide range of issues will be subject to discussion today. If necessary, further and more detailed information can be circulated through the clerk to the members. I also should mention that members will be in and out of the committee room due to different meetings taking place all over the campus, so you'll have to give us some forgiveness on that. So first up is Miss Kelly to give your opening statements on behalf of Belong To. You're very welcome.
I thank the Chair and the committee for the opportunity to address them on the topic of substance use and young people. My name is Brenda Kelly and I'm the Senior Drugs and Alcohol Youth Worker at Belong To LGBTQ+ Youth Ireland, and I'm joined today by Carmel Walsh, who is our Director of Youth Services. For 2 decades, Belong To has supported and advocated for lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender young people across Ireland. We work with and for LGBTQ+ young people from the ages of 10 to 23, and our services include a family support service, LGBTQ+ youth groups, and the only dedicated drug and alcohol support service for LGBTQ+ young people in Ireland. Substance use amongst LGBTQ+ young people remains a critical public health concern in Ireland. Recent research highlights that the group uses drugs and alcohol at a significantly higher rate than the general youth population. Young people and LGBTQI people have been recognised as groups that are more likely to use illegal drugs and/or binge drink. As such, they have been identified for targeted interventions by Drug and Alcohol Reduction Policy in Ireland. A 2024 study, Being LGBTQI in Ireland, found that 54% of LGBTQI respondents had used drugs in their lifetime, and half of those had done so in the past year. This compares to about 27% of the general youth population. Research also shows that this problem is not new. Back in 2016, the LGBT Ireland report found that almost half of LGBTQ+ young people aged 14 to 25 had used drugs recreationally, nearly twice the rate of their non-LGBT peers. Earlier research by Belong To in 2006 reported that 65% of LGBT youth had used drugs and 21% were using them regularly. Taken together, these studies suggest a clear and consistent pattern. LGBTQ+ young people have faced higher levels of substance misuse over the last 2 decades. The implications of these findings extend beyond substance use alone. Both the 2016 and 2024 study link drug and alcohol misuse to heightened mental health risks, including depression, anxiety, self-harm and suicidality. Experiences of bullying, discrimination and minority stress amplify vulnerability, creating a complex interplay between substance misuse and mental health outcomes. We've celebrated political and social progress relating to LGBTQ+ rights in Ireland over the past 30 years, but in recent years we've experienced a slow but steady increase in discrimination and hate, including violence, hate crime, hate speech amongst the LGBTQ+ community. This targeting has unfortunately been experienced by young people and staff within our service. When schools, communities and society feels unwelcoming and unsafe, young people turn to substance misuse as an escape. Among LGBTQ+ youth who have used drugs, 74% also reported that their identity was not accepted at home. Additionally, LGBTQ+ young people who have experienced homelessness in the past year were twice as likely to have used drugs than those in stable accommodation. A study commissioned by Focus Ireland and Belong To found that many of the LGBTQ+ young people who reported using drugs had begun to do so, or their use increased after becoming homeless. At Belong To, our aim is to reduce these risks through an inclusive, non-stigmatising approach that prioritises prevention and early intervention. We create safe spaces where young people can openly discuss substance use without fear of shame, ensuring they receive support that is confidential and affirming. Our harm reduction model combines direct support, education and community collaboration. We provide youth groups one-to-one guidance and tailored workshops that empower young people with the practical tools to make informed choices. By addressing underlying issues such as mental health challenges and social isolation early, we help build resilience and healthier coping mechanisms. In partnership with the North Inner City Drugs and Alcohol Task Force and local services, we ensure seamless referral pathways for crisis counselling, mental health and substance use support, working collectively to create a safer, healthier future for LGBTQ+ people in Ireland. However, many feel they cannot access LGBTQ+ services because of the shame related to substance use, and equally cannot approach drug services for fear of stigma and discrimination linked to their identity. One participant in the research we conducted with Focus Ireland described feeling double-closeted as both homeless and LGBTQ+, a term that resonates strongly with LGBTQ+ young people who were also using drugs, highlighting how isolated and invisible they feel. We are working to address these through training and education across external sectors such as schools, youth services, homeless services and importantly the drug sector, so that all support services are safe and affirming for LGBTQ+ identities. In 2021, we established an LGBTQ+ drug and alcohol advisory group with partners including Merchants Quay, Soul Project, Rialto Drug Service and Anna Liffey Project to identify training needs within the drug service. We are also collaborating with Outhouse on a proposal for an in-depth research into substance use patterns among LGBTQ+ adolescents and young people, including barriers to treatment, harm reduction strategies and training needs for professionals in the sector. Additionally, we facilitate outreach to external services, drug services when needed, and run harm reduction campaigns online to reach young people who may not be presenting to our service in person. These campaigns are often in collaboration with organisations such as the Gay Men's Health Service and Drugs.ie to ensure content reflects LGBTQ+ youth experiences. Our goal is clear: to ensure no young person feels invisible or unsupported because of who they are or the challenges they face. Through our programmes, services and inclusion training, we are striving to prevent substance misuse by creating safe and supportive spaces for LGBTQ+ youth. However, we cannot achieve this alone. We need greater investment and commitment from those who can drive change at national policy and legislative levels. On behalf of Belong To, I look forward to our discussion and hope these insights prove useful.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kelly. Mr. Ferron, you are up next on behalf of the National Youth Council of Ireland.
Chairman, Deputy Senators, on behalf of the National Youth Council of Ireland, thank you for the invitation to speak today on the topic of substance use and young people. I'm joined here today by my colleague Rachael Treanor, who is our manager of the National Youth Health Programme. Recommendation 14 of the Citizens' Assembly on drug use reinforces our broader call to strengthen youth work as a cornerstone of prevention and early intervention, ensuring that restorative justice and diversion initiatives are supported by accessible community-based services and inclusive youth spaces. When we talk about prevention, we must recognise that not all young people are in formal education, and even those that are may not fully engage with school-based programmes, and that's why youth work is so vital. Youth work offers a space where there is no judgment. Young people voluntarily engage and can freely express themselves, ask questions, constructively challenge opinions, and experience a variety of things that traditionally they might not get to access. The relationship youth workers, paid and volunteers, have with young people is unique. They meet young people where they're at, in their communities and on their own terms, creating safe spaces for honest conversations and meaningful engagement. If we overlook the role of youth work, we risk leaving behind some of those most in need of connection, support and alternatives to substance use. When young people have access to strong youth work programmes, they are more likely to make positive choices and less likely to engage in harmful substance abuse behaviour. This is due in no small part to the youth work focus on building confidence, developing coping skills and fostering a sense of belonging. We know that substance abuse doesn't happen in isolation, and it can often stem from stress, a lack of support or feeling disconnected. Youth work has the proven capacity to address these types of issues with young people in a positive, effective and youth-centred way. Indeed, the Red C polling for the National Youth Council of Ireland shows that 79% of the Irish public recognise the importance of investing in youth clubs, centres and services as essential supports to mental health and well-being. Through our training delivery with youth workers right across the country, we've heard the views of those who are working at the coalface with young people. They've raised a number of issues and concerns over the last year, and a number of themes have been emerging, including young people in crime, young people in social isolation, intergenerational impacts, drug use and mental health, access to services, access to substances, and vaping and nicotine pouches. These are discussed in greater detail in our briefing material. So across youth work settings, a significant amount of valuable practice is already underway to support young people through education, prevention and early intervention, ensuring that their needs are met in safe, inclusive and community-based environments. However, many services and teams remain overstretched due to limited resources, increased demands and increasingly complex issues and needs. In line with the recommendations made in the National Drug Strategy specific to the youth work sector and based on the National Youth Health Programme consultations with young youth workers, the following recommendations have emerged. The first is increased resources and capacity within youth work organisations so that youth workers, including detached youth workers, can meet young people where they're at and create safe, supportive spaces within communities and on the streets. Strengthening the capacity not only provides meaningful alternatives to substance use and involvement in drug-related activities, but also creates opportunities for youth workers to safely and positively engage with young people about their drug use. These conversations are grounded in trust and understanding. They can open up pathways to healthier choices and appropriate support services. We ask that there's an increase in funding to youth organisations to enable the development of counselling and therapeutic services for young people experiencing substance and mental health difficulties. This would allow those currently waiting on lists to access support more quickly in an environment that feels familiar and comfortable. Recommendation 31 of the Citizens' Assembly on Drug Use calls for a national strategy to enhance resilience, mental health and therapeutic supports. Increased funding for youth work counselling services directly advances the same by providing timely, community-focused support for young people while easing pressures on CAMHS and acute services. Strategic investment in integrated youth hubs should be prioritised to create inclusive spaces that reflect the diverse interests of young people, extending well beyond support. Co-located hubs could bring together youth work programmes, mental health supports, education and career guidance, and creative opportunities such as music, arts, coding and gaming under one roof. This model has the potential to not only provide meaningful alternatives to substance use and risky behaviours, but also to ensure young people can safely and positively engage with trusted youth workers about their experiences, including youth work. By fostering collaboration among services and maximising public investment, these hubs create accessible, welcoming environments that place young people's needs at the centre and strengthen community resilience. Finally, increase resources to enable the youth work sector to strengthen its role in education and prevention, complementing Recommendation 28 of the Citizens' Assembly on Drug Use, which calls for a comprehensive, age-appropriate, school-based drug prevention strategy led by the Departments of Health and Education in conjunction with the HSE. While schools and external experts will deliver structured programmes to children, young people, parents and teachers, youth work provides the crucial community-based dimension, building confidence, resilience and critical understanding of drug use and its impacts. By equipping young people to navigate peer pressure, make informed choices and engage in open conversations about substance use, youth workers can foster healthier attitudes and behaviours, and successful programmes already exist. The challenge is to scale their reach and ensure they're accessible to all communities. Thank you for this opportunity. Any questions?
Mr. Ferron, thank you so much. Our next contributor is Ms. Maher to give your opening statement on behalf of the Canal Community's local drug and alcohol task force.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the invitation to address you today. It's a privilege to contribute to this important discussion on substance use and young people, an issue that shapes communities across Ireland. In my role as a drug education worker with the Canal Community's local drug and alcohol task force, I have the privilege of working with skilled, compassionate workers across services in Inchicore, Rialto, Bluebell, and I welcome the committee's continued focus on education, youth and prevention. Young people today are growing up in a rapidly changing environment. They are navigating social media influences, shift in family structures, increased academic pressure, housing insecurity and the lasting effects of the pandemic. Mental health challenges are now one of the most common issues raised by families and youth services, and young people are turning to substances not to experiment but to cope. This kind of self-medicating is often a sign of deeper distress and without the right supports can quickly escalate. The drug landscape itself is changing faster than ever. Substances like HHC and other synthetic cannabinoids have become more available, often marketed online, specifically targeting young people and perceived as legal or safer. This isn't true, but as regulations tighten, new synthetic alternatives are emerging just as quickly. Young people are navigating a constantly shifting market, and frontline workers are struggling to keep pace. When HHC was made illegal, was there any consideration given for what young people who have already become dependent might turn to instead? Across the country, young people are being exploited and groomed into the drug trade, sometimes subtly and sometimes violently. The harms are hidden: fear, coercion, trauma, and in some cases serious threats to safety. Criminalisation will not protect these young people. They need intervention, support and pathways out, not punishment for being exploited. Prevention is not just a health issue. It includes education, housing, mental health and social justice. Prevention cannot rely on occasional talks and reactive responses. There needs to be ongoing partnership, consistent evidence-based education, staff training and clear referral pathways when concerns emerge. Prevention needs to include real-time information sharing, early warning systems and investment in innovative community education. It's important to recognise that substance use is often a symptom and not a cause. When young people feel connected, valued and hopeful about their future, substance use declines. Embedding youth participation in policy design, education programmes and prevention initiatives will make our responses more accurate and far more effective. The voices of young people themselves are essential. They are experts in their own experience. They understand emerging trends long before we do, and they can tell us what information they trust and what supports they will use. We need stronger structures that allow task forces to work side by side with schools rather than on parallel tracks. Schools are under tremendous pressure and often do not have the time or resources to address substance use. Prevention needs to extend beyond the classroom. Youth services, community clubs, sports teams and online spaces are all powerful environments for shaping behaviour. Equipping youth workers, coaches and community leaders with training and consistent guidance can ensure that young people receive the same supportive messages no matter where they are. After the pandemic, the needs in communities rose, but the funding stayed the same. Our task force currently funds the role of a family education support worker who works across 3 youth services and is still unable to meet the needs of these 3 communities. We also currently host the role of a wellbeing worker who works with young people aged 14 plus who have been impacted by substance use. This was a need that was not being met under current funding channels and was only possible through a generous donation. Stable funding for youth services, particularly in disadvantaged areas, is critical if we want to provide safe alternatives and early support. Multidisciplinary teams are needed in youth services, and investing in youth-focused substance use prevention can save the state money in the long term. When young people understand the effects of substances, feel empowered to make informed decisions and have supportive adults they can talk to, the outcomes are significantly better. Young people need places where they can connect, belong and build confidence, especially those who may not engage with structured education or sport. Safe youth spaces and recreational community supports are crucial. Youth projects, drop-in centres, youth cafes, outreach workers and community clubs provide protective factors that no information session can replace. Where these are lacking, we see higher levels of risk and harm. The most successful prevention strategies combine accurate information, consistent relationships, positive community engagement, innovative programmes and supports that young people can access without stigma. We need to get more creative in our responses to young people and substance use. In conjunction with Core Youth Service, I developed drug education escape rooms, which are a great example of the programmes that can be developed to educate young people on substance use. All of these issues, mental health, self-medicating, school engagement, synthetic drugs and exploitation are interconnected. The most effective responses share 3 features. They are local, they are relational and they are consistent. Drug and alcohol task forces are uniquely positioned to deliver this. We work in communities, with families, with schools, with youth services and with those young people who may not be visible to other systems. But to continue to do this effectively, we need stable resourcing, integrated pathways and national policies that match the realities we see every day on the ground. Young people thrive when they feel safe, supported and hopeful about their future. Our challenge and our responsibility is to create the conditions that make that possible. Thank you.
Smart, thank you so much for your contribution. Okay, members, going to open her up to yourselves. You'll have 7 minutes. The rota was submitted in advance. And Senator Fitzpatrick, you're first.
Thank you all for your presentations and for the work that you do. It's invaluable. It truly is invaluable, and you don't need to convince me of it. But we want to bring forward recommendations in our report that is going to strengthen the work that you do. So Mick, I might actually start with you in terms of the funding, because you've all said it, like without adequate funding, you can't meet the needs that are presenting. So, Mick, can you really, I suppose, give us a view on how funding trends have been changing? And I'm particularly thinking about there's different funding streams coming from youth services and then justice, and how they interact or don't interact, and what the impact of the differences has in terms of the delivery of youth services then in responding to community needs. You also mentioned then counselling, and you have a great example that that you spearheaded in a previous life back in Spear 17 with Cabra for Youth, and I think it would be really helpful to share with the committee the work of the Listen project, because it started as a pilot. It has developed very significantly, but it is something that I think this committee should look to secure funding for on a much greater basis, and I think you'll explain it much better than I ever could. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator, for those kind words. If I take the first question initially there in relation to youth justice and maybe the more kind of general youth sector funding. So I suppose in the youth sector we have noticed and welcomed a significant increase in funding towards youth diversion projects, and the experience on the ground would be in most cases those youth diversion projects work very closely hand in hand with youth work providers. It would be our experience that youth work providers in many cases have that relationship with the communities, relationship with young people, have the infrastructure, and I suppose have the approach, that youth work approach that has benefited, youth justice work. Unfortunately, I suppose when it comes to funding for youth work, we would find that actually it hasn't kept pace. The recent pre-budget submission that the National Youth Council of Ireland got collaboration from the sector on was a request for funding of circa 21 million uplift, and that was really to meet the increased demands. So while final confirmation figures are yet to come in, it has fallen short of that. But probably the takeaway figure there is that there was a required increase of 13% to even just stand still. So to keep up the current level of output and need, much less, increase the services in the way that we would very much like to. So, I mean, I and NYCI would be very much of the view that the infrastructure does exist in this country to deal with a whole range of issues and needs for young people, but it needs investment. It needs investment in the centres that we talked about. It needs investment in people. It needs investment in programmes. But investment now is going to save the state significantly down the line. And particularly, I suppose, there's a lot of conversation about whether there is a requirement to be more prudent and to recognise that some of the funding that's available today may not be available in the future, but we would say that investing now is a prudent decision. In relation to the Listen project, youth counselling, you're too modest to say, Senator, that you were very supportive of that work on the ground, and it was instrumental in bringing it to the level that it was. But essentially, this came about as initially back in I think it was around 2010, a concern in the local community about the level of youth death and youth suicide in particular. And we came together as community leaders concerned about how we could respond to that. Some small-scale funding was received, and with that, we developed a youth counselling service that focused on working with young people between 12 to 21. And the intent there was to place that service within the youth work setting, because the recognition was that you would remove maybe some of the stigma and barriers that potentially were associated with going to access counselling. We also made it free of charge, which was also a significant help. And over the years, we have developed that service, we have expanded it, we've brought it into schools, and we have tracked the benefit of that to young people. We measure the impact for young people against 6 kind of key metrics in their lives, and we use what they tell us, I suppose, to ultimately measure the effectiveness. And the results have been very positive. And what we are hearing back is that it does make a difference, even in a short period of time. So typically, most of the sessions would be, 4 to 8 weeks, typically. So what we felt with the Listen project was there is value in giving thought to how you can come up with a community response, but it does require the investment and support in order to make it work. And this is definitely a project that is scalable, but there are many more like it in lots of other organisations and communities. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, well done. And it was a community response, and it is a tremendous service there for young people who have availed of it and their families, and it is completely scalable. And I really think it would be great if you could circulate to the committee the findings of the Listen project, because it's incredibly valuable and it's a great example of what can be achieved when funding is applied. Would you say that there's a divergence now, and quite a wide divergence emerging between the funding that's coming from Justice Youth streams and the funding that traditional non-justice youth diversion youth services are being able to access?
Yes, it's a short answer. I mean, I don't have the exact figures to hand, but year on year.
I don't need exact figures. I think it's helpful for you to confirm to the committee that that is the case. Yeah. And I think the committee should set as an objective a correcting of that, because it is unhelpful.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mick, for the short answer. Next contributor is Deputy Anne Graves.
Thanks very much for all your presentations. They're really informative, I have to say. I do think we should acknowledge how crucial it is investment in our youth in particular, I think it's always going to help us down the line if we educate, prevent and provide support. And that's what all of you do collectively, so thank you for that. So I'll just go to very short questions because we've 7 minutes, which flies past really quickly. So I'll start with you, Rita, on belong to. I just want to acknowledge that, how adverse childhood experience have long-term effects on our young people, and particularly those that would be from the LGBT plus communities, and they have the added kind of impact of perhaps homophobic, transphobic issues to deal with. So my first question would be, how can we ensure that the strategy will give communities of interest like your own a central role in implementing actions relating to your communities? So how would you see it fitting in? And then secondly, for yourselves, you played a big role in the last strategy. So have you been involved in consultation in this one? And if not, what is it that you'd like to see in the strategy that protects your community, that provides support for your community?
Thank you, Deputy Graves.
Thanks so much. I suppose from our side as well, one of the biggest areas we look for support in is it's a holistic approach to supporting young people. So it's looking at the education and training of professionals as well, which reflects the LGBTQ plus inclusion strategy as well, which highlights the direct need for training on specific to LGBTQ plus young people as well. One thing also we were looking at then in terms of is that, I suppose, to reflect what Mick was saying, is in terms of the investment in youth work as well, and investment into youth services and providing long-term solutions to preventative youth work for young people as well. So multi-annual funding for youth services, and also looking then at like not just funding program-based work as well, but looking at investment into the capital and infrastructure as well in terms of our work as well. Yeah.
Okay. So the National Youth Council, Mick, so, you know, when we talk about prevention, the kind of the old mantra of, you know, just say no, clearly doesn't work and it never was going to work. So what do you think is the best model or models for prevention, number one? And then secondly, drug-related intimidation, a massive problem right across all communities, and it has a very serious impact, particularly on young people. So what do you think could or should be done to tackle the causes and consequences of that? What can we do, basically, do you think?
Well, in relation to the model, I mean, I think I'm very interested to hear some of what the task force are involved in. That sounds particularly interesting, the escape room. So I'll be looking forward to hearing more about that. But I guess from a youth work perspective, just more generally, you know, we would be of the view that the relationship is fundamental to, you know, to work with young people, to supporting young people, and ultimately to connecting and understanding what's going on for them. So sometimes we can be quick to say, well, let's do this activity or let's have this program, and while there is merit in that, you know, the fundamental precursor to that is that you are able to demonstrate to that young person that you understand what's going on for them, that you can hear what they have to say, that you have an appreciation for their experience. So I suppose whatever particular approach you use, that becomes the basis by which the efficacy of the program, I would say, or the model. In relation to drug-related intimidation, I mean, this is difficult. It's difficult, and there's people more qualified, you know, in this chamber today that could speak to that. But what we have found in my most recent deployment in North Dublin was that it was an issue that was causing huge difficulty for young people. It can appear sometimes that there is a choice that young people are making that is just black and white about whether or not to get involved in things that we probably might say is, you know, not necessarily in their best interest, but things are a lot more nuanced than that. There are huge pressures in terms of cost of living, there are financial pressures, there is this sense of hopelessness as well for some young people, particularly as it maybe relates to where they see their future going. There is a status that we need to acknowledge, but it is the case, I suppose what we found is through various different programs, including attached programs, that young people are interested in talking about it, but it's not always straightforward to walk away from it. And that's particularly difficult. Now, I'm aware that there are, you know, a number of programs that are out there for family, including the Drive program that is having some success, but it is one that probably requires a bespoke local response, and not one that's going to be straightforward.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, thanks for that. Leanne, finally. Just in terms of, you spoke about the changing use of different types of drugs by young people in particular. So just really, how have the challenges and needs of the Canal community changed? Not just around the specific type of drugs, but what other challenges have you faced? And also in terms of the drug task force, like it looks as though they have been undermined in some ways over recent years. So how do you feel that they can, the role can be strengthened? And likewise, if you could comment on just the drug-related intimidation, because you did touch on it, and I think it's, you know, affects everybody right across all areas, you know, so, yeah.
The challenges that I think young people are facing really comes back to mental health supports. I think that's what we are seeing from youth services and young people and families, that there is a lack of support there for families, and it needs to be a wraparound support as well. Like, if you offer support for the young person, there needs to be support there for the family too, for the parents. We do know that young people have moved to vape and HHC now, From what I know about it, it does kind of stay on the body a lot longer than normal cannabis would, and we are seeing psychosis and stuff like that with young people. So it is quite, you know, devastating for young people. Young people are telling me that there's new alternatives to HHC. They're telling me there's HHCP, there's HHCO. So they know first. They know that there's alternatives there. But also, what I hear is that young people return to spice as well in the absence of HHC. So it goes on, you know. I mean, at the minute, we are aware that young people from the age of 14 plus are using ketamine. You know, so it's a minefield of a playing field. You know, so I think some of the challenges can be like working like with the schools and stuff like that. It can be difficult because the schools have a curriculum to follow, but also I have a role in different areas as well. So timing and stuff like that. Also, I'm one person, so I can only do what I can do. So it might mean then that young people might not be getting the same service or the same curriculum or education.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to stop you there if that's okay. We're just a minute and 20 seconds over, but we'll come back to that, Deputy Graves. Before I move on, does everybody want to know what the escape rooms is? That way it's not eating into anybody's time. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, could you tell us what the escape room is? That way nobody's losing time, because we're all fascinated.
So as part of Drug and Alcohol Awareness Week, I was working with one of the youth services, core youth service, with Carol Highland as the manager there. We decided to take a different approach to young people and substance use. So we developed escape rooms. So there was 4 rooms. There was a cannabis room, a vaping room, an alcohol room, and a nitrous oxide room. The idea of the rooms, obviously, everybody knows what an escape room is. So, you know, there's clues and there's puzzles, but it's all information-based. So they're picking up information that they're not realising that they're picking up. The idea of each room then is that they have to collect one key message from each room and take it to the next room and to the next room. So the 4 messages then are collected, and then they come to me in the debrief room. So they have, it's, you know, it's very intense. They have to come in, write up their answers really quick, and that's when their timing is stopped. And then we just really had amazing conversations in the debrief room. Young people were so open and honest about what was going on for them. We were able to provide harm reduction. We were able to, you know, give them information that they can make informed decisions about themselves. I didn't take a stance on, you know, drugs are just bad, don't do them. It was very much a case of, you know, these are your choices and these are your decisions. You know, I won't be there, your parents won't be there, your youth workers won't be there. So when these choices are put to you, you know, it's going to be you that has to decide. And the best thing you can do, or we can do for you, is to give you all the information that we can. So they were really, really successful. They really, really went well. We had 180, we ran them for 3 days. So we had 187 young people come through them. I do have some kind of stats, or not stats, I suppose. We had a before quiz and we had an after quiz. So in the before quiz, the young people didn't have the information. In the after quiz, they had all the information. And it was great because not just around the 4 drugs that we done them on, they were able to ask about other things. They were able to ask about ketamine. We were able to warn them about the dangers there and that kind of thing. So they went really, really well. So, yeah.
Senator McQuillan, you're next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for asking that, because I was going to ask and then my time would have been gone. Leanne, your face lit up when you were telling us about that, and like that is what, you know, working with young people is all about. And I know it's easy for us to sit here sometimes and say thanks for the work that you do, because it can sound patronising, but we actually do really mean it. It is so important. I married a youth worker, and he actually ran a drug education and prevention programme out in Blanchardstown for years with young boys in football, and like I know the value of it. But I also know how empowered young people feel, and that is exactly what you were doing in the escape rooms. You were empowering them to make their own decisions. So I just want to ask you actually about the youth voice, which is, you mentioned it in your opening statement. It's so important that that voice is actually heard and actually comes across today in this hearing. So can you give us an idea of what the young people feel is the landscape for them, or the supports that they are either getting or that they are not getting? I know that youth workers are doing their best and task forces are doing their best, but how do the young people feel, Leanne?
From the conversations that I am having with young people, unfortunately, there is a lot of hopelessness out there. And I think that can be quite detrimental to how young people try to cope with life and the situations that they might face. I think that Like the youth services that are in my area, they do amazing work. They really do. The youth service teams are amazing staff, and they go above and beyond. Like the family support worker that I was telling you about, like she is amazing, but she's crossed between 3 services. She has only a couple of hours in each service, and it's the same with the wellbeing worker. She's 6 hours, I think it is, between each service, which is not enough. There's definitely waiting lists for mental health supports. There's definitely a lot more room for improvement, and I do think the community resources, like having activities in communities that are subsidised, like private activities are great, but not all families can actually access them. So we need like recreational options for young people that they can access. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, you also mentioned the pandemic, you know, which added to all of the challenges and I think changed the way we all live our lives. You know, not just young people who were looking for outlets and were suddenly stuck in bedrooms and like couldn't go anywhere and stuff. So it definitely did bring an awful lot more challenges. So how have things changed in terms of, you know, young people maybe presenting, or how has the delivery of a service changed? Like, has the funding changed? Like, it was an enormous upheaval to all our lives. And I was really conscious during the height of the lockdown. I was really conscious of young people who were already suffering maybe beforehand, either with addiction or mental health, and how that, you know, the closing in of their world would have made it so much worse. And you talked about, you know, self-medication and coping skills, and that's a lot of the time that's why young people turn to drugs. So how much has changed, and has the funding reflected the extra need?
I would say no, that the funding has not reflected the extra need, and I work across all the services, so I do see that the needs are there. I do have these conversations with staff where they're stretched beyond their limits and there's just no more resources there to support the people in the community. From young people, there's a lot of anxiety out there. There's a lot of like social anxiety. Being in physical spaces again is tough for young people, and that's why the mental health supports are so vital and important, because we need to get in before they have to figure out how to cope themselves. Do you know, that kind of way? Like the experimental on drugs, like it's supposed to be a rite of passage to, you know, do those kind of things later in life. They shouldn't be there just so that you're trying to get through your day. You know, that kind of way. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm conscious I'm asking you all the questions, but it's just so much of what you said resonated. The HHC was another thing, because I brought it up a couple of weeks ago with the department. And, you know, as soon as the new legislation came in, there was an alternative, like immediately on the market. And it's really hard to keep up with that. Like, it's actually impossible to keep up with that. So I wonder, for this committee, like, because you work in the space and you're hearing from young people, like, how do we tackle that? Because, like, I don't know how to keep up with that stuff. Like, it just keeps evolving and it's way ahead of the pace of change.
It's a difficult one, like, it really is. Like when I'm talking to young people, so I ran the escape rooms a second time. When I was talking to young people, they're not aware that HHC is even synthetic. Do you know, they're not aware that there's extra dangers there. Yeah. So we need to be getting in and educating them. Like, online spaces are where young people are. So we need to be doing health campaigns around this kind of stuff. It is happening, it is there. And we need to be not afraid to have the conversations, you know.
Carmel, you're nodding there, and I know you work with young people as well. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I suppose in terms of those health campaigns as well, we would do like Pride, harm reduction Pride, information campaigns during Pride months as well, because we find there's such a reach of young people that we can't reach through our direct youth service, and especially at a national level. So I think those like campaigns are so informative and important to reach young people on their phones and where they are in their rooms. One thing as well that comes up for us a lot is supporting the parents and guardians. We set up a family support service there last April, and from April to December we had over 450 direct supports with family and parents, guardians and foster carers looking for support. We also have this partnership with Pieta, which looks at supporting LGBTQ plus young people at risk of suicidal ideation and self-harm. And what's coming back from us from that partnership is, for a lot of young people, their mental health now is being affected by the mental health of their parents. So it's this needing this holistic approach to supporting the young person, as well as supporting the parents, supporting the communities and having those safe spaces that they can go to as well. So it's obviously it's about kind of, I suppose, investment into the youth sector, but also it's that holistic approach to supporting young people from all different areas in society as well, because it all affects their mental health as well. And I suppose in our research, being in LGBTQ+I in Ireland last year, it was 76% of young people from the ages of 14 to 18 have experienced self-harm or suicidal ideation. And that's just some stats from last year that we have identified this. And that's, so it's really prevalent in terms of the mental health needs of young people, not just LGBTQ+ young people, but young people in society. And I suppose it's up for us to reflect like Young Ireland's policies and strategies on that, and looking at focusing on mental health, but also then looking at the LGBTQ+ inclusion strategy and looking at how we can have a cross-departmental and supportive approach to this as well, I think. So.
Thank you, yeah. The cross-departmental thing is really important. Thank you. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you, Senator
Thanks,
Nicole. Senator Ryan, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. And thank you all for being here. Sorry, no. Yeah, thank you all for being here today. And Chair, just as an update, I was wondering if we could ask maybe, when we had our first couple of sessions, we had the department officials in here and they talked about a national campaign on HHC and the spend that they had for that. Could we get an update as to where that is, where they are with that campaign?
Yeah, we'll certainly go to the department and an update.
Because I think that would be like targeted to young people, with young graphics and stuff, because they're not going to look at the departmental stuff at all. But I suppose my first question is that youth workers, they are consistently emphasising safe spaces, so safe relationships, recreation opportunities, stable relationships. So how can we embed that, how can that be embedded in the policy nationally, at a national level, as I suppose a safeguarding mechanism when we're talking about these kinds of things? Anyone at all?
I think you'd struggle to find anyone involved in youth work who wouldn't welcome a more substantial investment in, capital investment in youth spaces, youth centres. As I mentioned earlier, from our perspective, this is something that's about investing in our future. It's investing in young people, our future workforce. And sometimes, even if people might look at it, well, it's about removing risk and danger, and it will do that. But it's also about creating spaces for young people to be, to belong, to thrive. So I would say that actually it requires will. It requires a kind of a political will and a commitment to that, and maybe a reframing as to what's important. There are other ways. Obviously, sometimes the example of, you can't give every centre a bus, and there's that idea, well, maybe we need to kind of work together or think a little bit about it. And that's where that idea of maybe the hubs might be a way of thinking about the issue of youth spaces. So you think a little about vacant spaces in towns and cities around Ireland, that they could be repurposed, that they could be shared, that they could have a focus not just on the youth work piece, but on maybe health programmes, drug and education prevention programmes, and various other supports that are there. So that's an approach, I suppose, that could be looked at by way of maybe making the cost a bit more manageable. But I do think it is about prioritising young people, and it's about prioritising those spaces. And providing safe spaces for young people is even more important now when we think of what's going on digitally online, when we talk about the social isolation and the mental health. And it is committed to in various different ways, on various different strategies. So really we're just encouraging to follow through and implement that with a commitment.
Just to follow up on that, I suppose Belong to, in partnership with some other youth organisations, services in Ireland and DCC, are looking at developing a Dublin youth hub as well. So it's at very early discussion stages at the moment. But what we found as well, that is a lot of young people, especially from our service who are LGBTQ+, are scared to come into the city centre now. They're not coming to our groups because they're scared of finishing a group at 8 p.m. and having to walk home. So we're looking at trying to develop a Dublin youth hub as well, that young people from all parts of Dublin can come to. It doesn't matter if you're LGBTQ+, if you're from a migrant background, or you're from working class Dublin, that everyone can come to a space that is a safe space and a drop-in. So that's hopefully something that it's we are looking at consultation, and we're really hoping that will be something we can move forward with in the next coming years as well. I suppose for us is even with the rights a couple of years ago, we had young people trapped in a building until 2 o'clock in the morning until we could safely get them home. And this is the realities on the ground. We always joke about risk assessments and having the worst risks on our risk assessments, but these are realities that we have to face and have to be aware of when you're working in the Dublin city centre as well. And I think to have those safe spaces is vital for those young people to be able to come into town, and to see young people back in town would be amazing, and to have a space for them to go and I'll be welcome and here and be safe as well and be myself.
Sounds great, and I suppose even I know I would love to, but I'm sure other people on the committee would love to hear how that would work and how that could be replicated. Because for me, I live in a rural constituency where youth services are very far and few in between. So sometimes it's even harder. And then if you are potentially part of the LGBTQ community in a rural setting and all of that comes with it, it can be sometimes even a little bit harder sometimes for people. My last question to you, when I have the 2 minutes, is should, in your opinion, the committee recommend formalised partnerships between, I guess, youth reach schools, drug task forces and youth services to ensure that the message is consistent and that there's like a clear referral pathway, because all of these people are key players in what is around prevention and I suppose education and in drugs. So like, is that something that you think would be of use, that like you'd come together and there'd be a pathway at each level maybe, you know, because like you said, schools can't do everything, you know, youth reach can't do everything, local drug task force can't do everything. So should it be something that...
Well, I suppose I would say that that's probably happening on the ground in many cases. I mean, yes, it could be underpinned, you know, by exploring whether a kind of strategy would help formalise that and provide kind of structures. But actually, in practice, what you find is there is a very good collaborative working relationship in many communities between school personnel, school completion programmes, homeschool liaison, youth workers, justice workers, youth reach projects, training coordinators. Do
you think though that if that was formalised, that the funding could look much better and that there's a pathway for everybody to, you know, be like, okay, you know, this is the funding that we have, or increase of funding so that, you know, I suppose, I don't know how to put this in a correct way.
Are you thinking in terms of accessing school or accessing...
I suppose the access to it and the access to funding on a level playing field for all of these stakeholders, because, you know, some might get more. Like, for instance, Dublin will get a lot more than Cork would get a lot less, or little rural community projects would get a lot less. But if there's like a streamlined kind of maybe framework for everybody, that maybe it'd be easier to fight for, I suppose, on our behalf, to fight for that extra funding.
Well, certainly, I mean, the National Youth Council of Ireland would welcome the fact that youth work has now moved back into the Department of Education and Youth, and that's a positive development. So it does open up the possibility for more collaboration and structures in that regard. I think there's, you know, what kind of a framework could be put in place to make that work more efficiently. Be very interested in seeing that. I know we are exploring ourselves, even as a sector, ways in which we can support, you know, young people to access and stay in school with various different programs. And similarly, as I said, we would work closely with our other educational partners. But yes, I mean, if there is a framework to support that in terms of funding and resources, then absolutely we'd be interested in exploring that.
Thank you, Senator Ryan. Senator Costello.
And thank you for all your contributions and the work you do. There's many great organisations in Tala, where I'm from, that provide unbelievable support to our youth. Firstly, I think there should be an education campaign about weed. Like, I think that everywhere you go, all the kids just think it's nothing. It's not causing damage. It's just a safe drug nearly. So I think there's a lot around that's kind of been, you know, not getting the proper attention. As I'm reading through all this, a lot of the times it comes up about family support. So where there's an absence of family support, and it seems to be quite prevalent in our society at the moment, that there's a lack of family support for children. So how do we help those children when they're in a situation where they're living with parents who are in addiction, you know, and you guys are trying to work with them, how do we best support them? Like, is it fair on the children to be left in them circumstances like that's damaging them, or do you think that the supports, the wraparound supports are in place that are helping children cope with being in them circumstances, you know, to kind of break the generational cycle, you know, and to show them that life doesn't have to be like that? You know, just what supports do you think would be good? Like, should there be an awareness campaign for parents about the effect the living environment can have on the children and the destruction that it can cause to these children?
I think just to start off with, and not all young people who are living in those circumstances will go to use substances. A lot of them actually are very anti it, but when it comes then down to peer pressure and social isolation, the pressure of them then to actually use substances, so it's about trying to support them to develop those core competencies, that they are confident in themselves, they have the self-esteem, they have the awareness to know. And it does come back down to, like everybody has spoke about it, it's the community element, allowing them to have access to activities, hobbies within their local community, so that they have an alternative, or that they can escape their environment that they're in. And it goes beyond just kind of youth work and sport. It goes into coding, it goes into music, it goes into arts and crafts, so that there is an alternative, and a young person who has an interest in something, they have it within their community and they can access it. So it's about bringing it all back kind of to that local environment as well.
I suppose from our side, we would, with our new family support service, we would see, I suppose, I mean, we know from research that familiar rejection can cause as well an increase in substance use amongst LGBTQ plus young people. So it is really about providing that holistic support by supporting parents and guardians. We would have calls and parents just don't know where to start. They don't know what is the beginning and what's the end, and they're just like, because it's a journey for the whole family as well. So it really is about having that supportive approach and providing the tools and skills for them to be competent in supporting their young person as well, but also having it in a safe and support environment for them as well, that they can ask the questions that they might be scared to ask as well. Because it is, I think it is a challenge for families to try to get it right, and then as well with their intersectionality needs as well that could be there.
It definitely feels like in many cases it's probably a little bit more bespoke than awareness, more general awareness. You're looking at what's the family circumstance, and there's, potentially there could be trauma there. There's certainly a significant amount of need. My experience has been that where you do have those type of family support services available to you, they sometimes have the capacity to work more intensively with the family unit, and they can yield, very significant results. But what you're finding is in many cases weed becomes a kind of a primary coping mechanism for young people in those circumstances, and it is very normalised. Absolutely.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking of all the community and work that's been done, and the kids are escaping as such, but then they're going back, and does that set them back the way? It's they're feeling so, happy in one environment, and then they're going back to the unhappy environment. That's just what I'm thinking about. And also, do you think that there should be a focus on, when family support and services for when they age out, when they get to 18? Now, I do know of a service in Tallaght that there's no such thing as aging out, and they provide like counselling services and therapy and all, and I just think that that's fantastic, because when you look at kids when they're 18, there's not much of a difference between 17 and 16, and with families, like a lot of mums and dads need to support their kids. So do you think more funding should be put into that side of things to kind of, not just kind of cut them off at 18? And
well, the funding does go to cover 10 to 24-year-olds, so right. It is that early adult phase. But where is the cutoff? You can find somebody who's just gone over but who still needs support. So I would say that at the moment it's probably about the kind of right age, and what you'll find then is at a maybe at a local level specific to the need, that people can be supported or signposted to other services. That's
And
what-
just, yes, we're saying about community hubs, have you ever worked with libraries? Like in Tallow, our library, has they've totally transformed kind of libraries in the area, and it's full of activity, and they have like a hangout room for kids with a pool table, PlayStation, all that. Have you ever kind of built relationships with the libraries for that kind of a partnership?
So that would be them two sort of questions which link into this answer for you, because that's something that we've recognised and belong to as a need, the whole aging out thing. So we work similar to what Mick said, we work with young people aged 10 to 23, and what we were seeing was when they were turning 23, it was just a very like abrupt ending. It was like, okay, like where do I go from here? So we've developed, we're in the middle of developing a project with young people. It's just an aging out project, so it's based on their needs. So the idea would be that they wouldn't age out naturally. And we're doing that in partnership with Outhouse. So the idea would be young people would start dipping their toes into both services before they fully age out, but also be with external support such as libraries and sports clubs. So linking them in with external services. So when they're aged out, belong to, it's just not like cut there for all their social supports. But in terms of family support and aging out, as far as I'm aware, our family support service doesn't have a cut-off point. So we would support parents and guardians of LGBTQ plus people of any age. They don't have to be within our age range, so the parent can ring with a concern for their 40-year-old son.
That's brilliant, and I do think that gentle kind of aging out is much better. Like, you know, somebody doesn't wake up 18 with all the answers and ready to, they don't need their ma or da anymore, you know, so that's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Costello. Deputy Colin Brooke, you are next. Would like to take
Thank you very much, and my apologies for being late. Unfortunately, I was caught in the matter and they ended all. Just there in relation to one of the issues you're talking about, you know, new substances or new drugs becoming available, and about getting information out about the danger of them. Do you think that we could be doing a lot more in that area? And the question then is that when we get information back, have we the structures for getting the information out, warning of the dangers? For instance, we've done this very effectively, for instance, in relation to festivals, where, you know, we've set up this sampling process, and it has worked really well as regards getting the word out there that a particular product that's available at the event is dangerous. I'm just wondering, in an overall context, should we be doing more on this, and how can we set up the structures to make sure we get the information out? I'm not sure.
Whoever would like to jump in first?
To answer your question quickly, yeah, I think we definitely could be doing more. Similar to what Leanne was saying previously, like a lot of the concerns that we would hear would be coming directly from the young people, and that's often the first time we would even hear about like a new substance or a stronger strength. And I think like we do need to have more awareness campaigns. As far as I know, the only awareness campaign for nitrous oxide was done by DCC last year, and it was a great campaign, but it wasn't. We need more, especially for a drug that's so prevalent among young people. I know drugs.ie have similar, like a bit on nitrous oxide at the minute, but I don't think anyone is doing a campaign to highlight how prevalent it is and the risk that it's having on young people.
But it's about getting information out if there's a particular new item on the market that is dangerous. About have we enough mechanisms in place to get the information out in a timely manner?
No, not amongst youth services.
And the question is, how do you set up a structure like that to get that information out?
We don't have it amongst the youth services, youth sector. In drug services, we would have. I don't really know how we could do that. Like, I think we'd need, more streamlined committee, or MICI will have an idea. Or
Well, I suppose going to draw a point that there's something here about recognising where you know, the online space that young people inhabit, and the impact of social influencers, the impact of I suppose how access to drugs has become easier. Some of those former barriers or traditional barriers to drugs acquisition have been removed. And there's probably a space there for a kind of a digital type strategy that's targeting that awareness in a way that we haven't really looked into. So I think there is capacity there definitely for that. Yeah.
But do you think that there is a need to set up something to deal with this issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a recognition that there are risks in relation to online engagement for young people, like a whole range of them, and access to substances is but one of those. But I think it could be part of a kind of a multi-pronged approach. So there is campaigns that go on locally. There's campaigns that go on nationally. Through national youth work organisations. There are health promotion campaigns. There's obviously the work that the task force are doing. But I think there is probably a gap there potentially in relation to the digital piece that we could look at. Yeah.
Okay. And has there been any proposal put together on that as regards presented to the department or to the relevant authorities, whether it is justice, whether it is health, whether it is the HSE, has there been anything or any engagement with those departments or with the HSE on this matter?
Yeah, well, there may have been, but not that I'm aware of. I might defer to Leanne on that from the task force perspective.
But I would just echo what you've been saying, around the online spaces. We need to be, using the spaces where young people are, and they need to be quick, really short messages that we just give the right information. So it's important that we get the right messages to give as well. But I also agree as well among youth services that there should be some sort of sharing system when new substances are coming on board, because it is quick and we need to be able to share information across with professionals so that we can provide information to young people when these things do come about.
Okay, and what about then in relation to schools as well, as regards getting that information into especially secondary schools? Is there sufficient capacity there at the moment to deal with it within schools as well?
I think, for myself personally, if I become aware of something, I would keep the schools that I work with informed, but that's just myself in my own role. How other task forces do that, I'm not sure. But it can be, some task force areas have a lot more skills than I would have as well. So it can be quite difficult if you've got quite a high number of skills in your area to be the one person that's trying to inform everybody. So I think if we did have a centralised system where, these messages could be delivered straight away, I think that would be amazing, yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Thanks so much, Deputy. Deputy Rory O'Murku.
Carmel Walsh, agus the Falter Rove Kildare, Shaw. Thank you very much for your contributions. Apologies about being in and out, but that's just the madness of this place. And look, we're dealing with an element of madness when we're talking obviously about drugs and young people, and obviously whether it's nitrous oxide or for those that move on to others, and in some cases some who will fall into really, really bad cases of addiction. And I suppose the important things are what an awful lot of youth work can do. It can provide an intervention that people don't necessarily see as an intervention, and I suppose it's how you reach those most difficult to reach cases. It's no more than football teams and everything else. They're just people who are removed absolutely from everything, and I suppose it's that piece about the safe spaces and whatever else, and what can be done. And on some level, I think we need a real conversation. I think I've said it before. It's looking at the entire issue that's in front of us, and then it's looking at the resources. And it is multi-government, or multi-department. It is interagency, and it is that idea that everybody who is needed is tied in, because sometimes that doesn't happen. And then it's making sure then that if there are deficiencies in whatever service that is filled. But it's from your point of view, what can be done, and that's as more to make as many as possible that can, particularly those that will fall into, as I say, who may have more problematic home lives and whatever else. And while there's a whole pile of organisations and agencies that have responsibility, but we need to make sure that we catch as many people as possible. We provide those supports, and then also the vital thing if someone could go through, how you signpost when you deal with a young person who has fallen into the throes of addiction or the particular issues as regards that they're starting to do runs for the local drug dealer or whatever, which unfortunately, the age bracket we're talking about is getting younger and younger all the time. So start at one end and we finish another, and I'll take an entire 20 minutes. We'll start. All right.
Yeah, I suppose that will come into the LGBT national strategy, inclusion strategy, and part of that names the need for safe spaces outside of the LGBT sector for LGBT young people and people in general, the community, and it names health services and social services within that, and that's something that we really embed and belong to too. Like, a lot of our work would be creating safe spaces within established sectors for LGBT, the LGBT community. And we do that through training and education, and working with the services. So we have like 18-month-long programs for schools, youth services, and a new one for the homeless sector. So it's working with the services to look at their policies, practices, and spaces to make sure that they're inclusive LGBT identities. Yeah, do you want to comment about that one?
No, and then in terms of signposting, it's just working with the, I suppose, local areas as well. So looking at that kind of a metal approach to the young person and where it's their local services. Like for us, maybe it is referring it onto the local services in their local areas as well. And
and metal probably falls down in relation to the deficiency that exists in all services at the minute, and that's where we need that proper review done. Yeah.
And it's difficult, I suppose, as well when you have, I suppose, I mean, like it's like any youth service and stuff like that. They're always such a retention or like changeover in staffing. And that's, I think, any kind of social or community sector now. There's not a changeover, so nearly finding the right people to go to again to refer, who knows you and can work. Something that can be a challenge as well to get the right person as well to refer.
Losing relationships and institutional memory as well, which is vital.
Yeah.
I'm aware of projects where they particularly set out to target those hard-to-reach young people. Now, ostensibly, and it's obviously relevant for the committee here today, the focus was on young people who were at risk or involved in, kind of drug use, drug dealing behaviour. And what that looked like initially, particularly when it was being set up, was you just you provided a consistent presence with consistent staff members, across the week and evenings, weekends, and you just looked to build that relationship, get to be known. And, some of it was about just trying to offer something to those young people who were making a conscious decision not to engage in youth work or anything else in many cases, who were likely to be regarded as neat, not in education, employment or training. And, for the most part, from their perspective, were at work, doing what they were doing, and in many cases were tied to certain places at certain times. But that relationship, took months and months to develop and to get a sense as to where young people were at, and also for the detached youth work team not to be seen as a threat, to what was. You
can't be the guards and another guys. Yeah.
It needs to be a very different role, and they need to walk that line very carefully. And that's, I suppose, where the aspect of non-judgment comes in. But what has happened as a result of that is young people have reached out and they've got involved in training courses. They've come involved in activities that they hadn't in the past, and in some cases. They've got employment through that, but probably what was particularly encouraging is we had a young person who spoke about a younger sibling who was getting involved. So from their point of view, they couldn't see a way out yet, but they were concerned about a younger sibling. So kind of almost made that referral through. But there is another cohort who you don't see on the street. And possibly a legacy of COVID, who spent a lot of time at home, who have that social anxiety, may or may not be self-medicating a little bit, and that's where those relationships with those partners are quite important. So, if it's people in schools who are aware that this young person hasn't come in, or in many cases might be social workers who might get in touch, And there is a capacity among youth work. I mean, there's a capacity subject to resources among youth work to be able to reach out and make a connection in a way that perhaps some of the other state agents can't.
We need a comprehensive set of interventions, but it's a very specific one that you can do that others can't. And it's, as I say, it's just making sure we can fill in as many of the gaps as possible. And we catch as many. This is never going to be perfect, but it can be a lot better.
Thank you, Deputy. Time's up.
And I know it was.
I know. So I think we've talked to everyone else, so my questions will take 7 minutes, that's okay. What, in terms of at the end of the 7-month period here, we're going to have a report to deliver. What pitfalls should we avoid when we talk about young people? Like, I'm very conscious of politicians talking about young people, so my headphones will have very many years ago. But what pitfalls should we avoid when we're talking about young people?
So I wonder, have you talked to young people? Have you had young people here?
This is one of the questions that we're asking.
Yeah.
So,
I think that might be good.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We have invited young people, and young people will be here. But in terms of what else do you see in terms of your work, that when we have a report in our hand after 9 months discussing young people, substance misuse, substance use, and all of that goes with it, what should we do to avoid being patronising, to avoid being almost repeating the mistakes of the past? How can we do better?
I think we need to recognise that young people know a lot more than we give them credit for. They see it all on the ground every day, and I think, you know, it can come from parents' perspectives and stuff. It can be quite nerve-wracking to when do you have the conversation, and you don't want to be giving young people ideas and this kind of thing. But I think we really need to recognise that young people are living this life and they know what's going on. They know a lot more than we do.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else wants to contribute to that?
Yeah, it is to speak to the young people on the ground, because, as you said, like, this is their reality, and we are always going to be playing catch up with them, especially when it comes to substances. And they're very open and honest in letting you know what exactly they need, what exactly is impacting on them. So just to have that real life experience, instead of us maybe assuming or putting it on them, that you're getting their experiences, because, as I said, like, they will speak to you, and they will be very truthful in like what their needs are.
I think it's identifying that there's an intersectionality of needs going on for young people as well. So it might be, you know, substance misuse, but it might be also mental health. And I suppose it's looking at the picture as a holistic approach to it. I suppose a solution to it, I think it's really important as well to look at.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, Mick.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say I don't know that it will be missed, but I think maybe just acknowledging what's working well, what the achievements, the protective factors, maybe celebrating what kind of young people are doing right, I suppose, from the perspective of the report or whatever, because obviously it's substance misuse is an issue. But in many cases, you know, young people are managing very well under the circumstances that they find themselves in. So.
Yeah, and I think that harm reduction and early prevention, to have that as, you know, I suppose, a core to it as well, in terms of the report, and having that lens when working with young people or writing a report about this. I think sometimes it's difficult to measure. So the impact of those preventative programs on young people, because you can't, say we stopped X amount of young people from drug misuse, but what you can do is saying that we've actually engaged in, increase the confidence of young people. We can increase their literacy around drug use and stuff like that, and kind of just having it as that kind of lens that it's the preventative side of it.
I'm going to ask a question I think I know the answer to. I know the answer to. Has youth worked harder in the last 5-10 years? It seems I worked in a youth work facility back in the LGBTQ back 12 years ago in Dublin. The role of a youth worker now seems infinitely more difficult, or am I just getting older? But what happened to make it so?
No, it's definitely getting harder. There's a more complexity of needs. It has turned very much into sort of intervention-based work, because there is no access for young people to maybe get access to services. So they're youth workers sort of like a holding space now, because young people are waiting to see CAMS or see a mental health service, and they can't get access to it quick enough, so they're coming to the youth work organisation because they have that relationship with the youth worker, that they can have a conversation with them. As Mick had said earlier, like, it's a place where they're not judged. They can kind of be challenged constructively, but they're still waiting to see the appointment for whatever it is, whether it's substance use, whether it's mental health. So it's a lot more complex than what it traditionally was. But the youth workers are being upskilled in terms of like youth mental health first aid, for example. Like, we're trying to roll out that training because it helps the youth worker have that brief intervention to keep that young person where they're at, so that it doesn't then turn into maybe a treatment plan for them, or maybe that they can't get access to services.
I'm forever finding myself not so much falling into a trap, but I represent a city centre Dublin constituency, and too often I'll find myself calling for more guards around here for a variety of reasons, and some of them are very, very legitimate. What would happen if I called for more youth workers and more better investment in youth workers? Because I'm conscious of the type of issues that we're dealing with kids on mopeds, scooters, all of those sort of things, the drug-related crime. Should I be calling for more youth workers? Well, no. But as a call for more youth workers, and you give me kind of what that would actually mean in terms of addressing some of the issues that were...
Yeah, I think it's a call for more youth workers, but also it's important to have a call for, I suppose, good employment reason, contracting for youth workers to come in as well. I mean, for a lot of youth workers, you're getting yearly contracts. Funding is year by year as well, so you don't know from one year to next whether you're having funding, which is not sustainable for youth workers. Oh, yeah, in terms of as a professional pathway as well. I think it's the validation of youth work as a professional field and to be recognised. I think one of the challenges, I suppose, within the 10 years is like we're still trying to justify what youth work is and explain what youth work is, in terms of to like all aspects of society.
Should we do that? Mm-hmm. Should we do that? Should that be part of our report in terms of calling what youth work is and explaining?
Yeah, because I think it's something that we constantly, I think we have to showcase what we are and what we're not sometimes in terms of what we do. And I think we need to be really showing the value of youth work to be able, one, that'll bring in more people into the workforce, but also improves the investment in capital, wages for youth workers, to improve the quality of youth work that we can deliver as well to young people.
Yeah, recruitment and retention of youth workers, it's probably similar in other sectors, but it's particularly acute challenge at the moment. But why more youth workers? You will access more young people, you will open centres more evenings, you'll be able to deal with more complex issues. Youth work has proven itself, and I'm sure many of you know this, to be a kind of an approach that can engage with young people more effectively than most others. Just by dint of the fact, I suppose, you've got that relationship, you've got that understanding of that kind of personal development need that's going on. And increasingly what we're finding is, we're talking about substance use today, but we're all aware of the tensions that are going on in communities. We're aware of the mental health, the cost of living. So there are increasingly complex needs. And even young people presenting themselves, there's increased levels of neurodiverse young people coming to looking for service, and we are trying to do that with the same level of funding, and it's proving quite challenging.
Okay, thank you. My time is up, so I'm going to move on to the second round of questions. Deputy Fitzpatrick, you have 4 minutes.
Yeah, thanks a million, Ciara. And completely thank you for saying that, Carmel and Mick. It is retention and recruitment is the single biggest issue, and the lack of, I suppose, that flows from that is the professionalisation of it. Youth workers are doing an incredibly valuable job, and it's touching so many different areas of society, not just the young person, not just the family, not just the schools, not just the community, but then everything that goes with it, the mental health, the employment, the contribution that young people can make, everything before we get to drugs. Okay, so we absolutely need to make a recommendation, and that was my earlier question, was about the funding, because it is about, as you say, Carmel, like I am a voluntary director of youth service going back 14 years. We don't know from year to year what our funding is. We're employing people on very precarious terms, and we're incredibly lucky to have the young the people that we have working with young people. It's not good enough, so it has to be a strong recommendation from us, because, as you say, it's built on trust and relationships. It's only when there is trust, only when there is a relationship with trust, that a young person opens up. And quite rightly, they're at a stage in their life where they're making conscious, critical decisions about everything and about everybody they meet. Why would they? So we need to invest in it, and it'll pay back in spades. Just in terms of belong to, Cover for Youth actually was one of the first to get one of your Rainbow Awards. And I'm just wondering, because it took a bit of effort for us to get that. Yeah. I'm very proud, but... And at the time, I think there was about 6 or 9 maybe youth services in the country. And I'm just wondering, has that number increased? And if it hasn't, what will it take for that number to increase? Because it's really valuable when I think a youth service gets that award, because what it does is it sends a signal that this is an inclusive space for everybody. And I think if every youth service and every organisation that had young people using or engaging or being a member of it had that award, it would send a really strong signal in every school, every club. We're inclusive. Yeah. So what's the barrier?
So I suppose it is funding is one of another. It comes back again to funding. The Rainbow Awards, we are delivering that through fundraising. So from fundraising from public, that's how we run our Rainbow Award. So we've currently have I think it's 28 organisations have gone through the process at the moment, which is amazing. Okay. So I wish I had the figures now. I think this year we trained 260 youth workers with the 10 service who went through it this year, and we've recruited another 10 for this round cycle as well. So it's, I suppose for people who don't know the Rainbow Award, it's an 18-month process where we look at the organisation as a whole in terms of how inclusive it is to LGBTQ plus youth work. For us, it's really important, I suppose, that young people have access to LGBTQ plus youth work all across Ireland. I think when Belong To started 22 years ago, people used to come up from Mayo, from like Kerry, all these areas to come up to LGBTQ plus youth space in Dublin. So for us, it's really about, we always say it's put ourselves out of a job, that there's spaces for young people in their local area that can attend. So the Rainbow Award will support youth workers in kind of having kind of an inclusive approach, looking at residential policies, looking at their kind of what policies are we including inclusion and diversity, and really having a critical lens to approach the LGBTQ plus youth work. So yeah, I suppose for us, like we would hope each year to have, we'd love to expand it and have like do 30 or 40 organisations per year, but just in terms of resourcing capacity, we can only do like, we're currently doing 10 to 15 a year, but it's been a fantastic opportunity. If you want, we can send you some of the impacts of, we have an event in January which will award these people, the organisation went through this year, their awards, but it's been fantastic for people to feel confident in working on LGBTQ plus topics and not feel like, oh, I don't know, because at the end of the day there's young people, so it's a great opportunity for organisations to celebrate that as well.
No, well done. It's very empowering for the organisations, and then it's incredibly valuable for the young people and for the wider community. I think it would be useful for the committee if, in time, Carmel, if you could come back to us with details of the additional funding that would be required, because it's a model that's there, that's working, and we should really be promoting it and looking for funding for it. Similarly, and I'll shut up then, Kirloch, but Mick, at the start you said that you were trying to get to the bottom of the actual funding changes. I've been trying to do the same thing. What was announced in the budget and what is actually going to come through. If you make progress with that, it would be useful for us, because we need to be calling for a significant uplift in funding for youth services.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Deputy Burke, would you like to have a second round?
Thanks.
No? Well then, any of your contributors, if there's anything you haven't said, anything of interrupted you?
One short question.
Yeah, go for it, Deputy.
The real live, the real-time trends of drugs usage or substance abuse, actually, I suppose. The questions about, we all accept, I think, that there's a massive need for greater funding and resources into prevention and awareness. But from my experience, I'm not aware of if a youth worker detects, let's say, the nitrous oxide when that emerged. So we knew about it locally. We could respond locally with our youth service and that. But I don't think that there's any, and this is, I'd like you to know if I'm wrong here, is there a mechanism to alert back into the HSC? Is there a real-time kind of, even as simple as an email box for youth workers or any member of the community, I guess, drugs task forces, we're seeing a massive spike in whatever at this location, or, you know, does that exist? Does it?
It would happen. Like if we were experiencing in our community a certain rise in some substance, then we would report it in, yeah.
Okay, and then do you get feedback?
We'd be like, if, I suppose it depends on the
It's the
information
HSE,
that
is
they
it? Sorry.
have. With the HSE,
Yeah.
So it depends on the information that they have that they can provide us with, but it might take time for that as well sometimes. But they would obviously send out alerts as well if there's substances that are not, or that are new onto the scene, new psychoactive substances, we would get alerts about that as well.
Yeah, okay, that's great, thank you.
But then it would be up to the task forces then to do.
Yeah, and have you got the resources to do that? Yeah.
We try our best. Yeah,
I suppose you have a communication mechanism with your users, and
and we would definitely keep in communication with all the services that we work with. Yeah, absolutely.
And in terms of getting the young person's voice into, I think it's really important, the messaging and the communications, you know, adults trying to design messaging to young people, I speak as a parent, is very challenging. And I consider myself a fairly good communicator, you know. So is it best that is done locally, do you think, or is there the potential for some sort of a centralised thing? I'm very struck by, with our youth service, you know, City Council, for example, would come with a plan for maybe the playground, maybe the skate park, maybe whatever. And they actually might engage with some of our young people. And a lot of work would have gone in from the local authority into designing what they thought was going to be a really valuable space. There'd be quite a bit of budget assigned for it. And actually, when put to the young people, they'd be like, well, actually, really what we're looking for is just kind of space of our own to hang around. You know, it wasn't going to be fit for purpose. There was no bad intention here. It was all good intentions. But how do we best get the young people's voice in? Is it at a local level, or can there be something done in the centre?
I think young people want to speak, you know, like I think if you ask young people, they will tell you. But I think, like when we're talking about safe youth spaces as well, like while youth work programs are so important, there's also just a space to be.
Just to be,
you know,
that's
just
it?
to be, you know, just to, you know, sit there with your friends, you know, have a Coke or whatever, you know, a juice or whatever it is. But, you know,
100%.
that you just have a space to be.
But just not to, I think that is the thing that is most missing, actually. I think that is what young people, they're not adults yet themselves, and they're not kids anymore. They just want to be themselves without being overlooked or instructed or criticised or suggested. You know, it's like what you said about the programme. It's not necessarily about having a programme, Mick. It's about understanding what do they want to do, what do they want to talk about. So.
I think in relation to quality youth work practice, it is the case that, you know, you should be starting from a place that is youth-centred, and, you know, obviously cornerstone of that is asking and engaging with young people about what it is that they want. So yeah, look, if that's going on effectively as it should, then, you know, when you're making decisions about spaces and programs and activities, then you're very much holding that view and that voice. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator. Conscious Deputy Gillian Till has been a very interested participator. You're very welcome. Would you like to ask a question?
And good afternoon, everybody. I was sitting in rapt attention here at the back. I'm from Meath East, and first of all, to thank you all for the immeasurable and invaluable work that you do with young people. I've previously been a county councillor, so I've been a member of the North East Regional Drugs and Alcohol Task Force, and would have had a lot of interaction with fantastic youth diversion workers in Meath. Fantastic service. Just by way of, I suppose, for information, well, first off, question, if I may, the escape rooms. Is there a template? Please, please, please. And
we are looking at trying to develop it further, but it's very, very resource heavy, and I'm only one person, so we are looking at doing them again. To make them into a toolkit or something, we have looked at that kind of thing, but because the props are so valuable to the actual experience, that could be quite difficult as well. So we are still kind of working on it.
And then second, I suppose more just by way of information, and thank you very much. I passed on a note there. The Corlin and Og, so it's like the youth version of county councils, and Meath, Corlin and Og as their project. We would have, formerly there were joint policing committees, and now they're community safety partnerships. Thank you, Rory. And I think it was probably 2 years ago, just after lockdown, etc., we would have interacted with the Meath, Corlin and Og, and they'd choose a project for every 2 to 3 years, and it was their clear, the feedback from their members, from all of the young people, was they wanted not quite the be japers scared out of themselves, but they wanted to know the harms of all the different substances. So they made a video, and I will link in and get that information. We've a drugs task force and a board management meeting tonight online. So I'll get that info, just check the permission, and I'll share it with the Secretariat. But just say thanks a million. And if you ever want a hand on the scaling up of the escape rooms, please count me in. But thank you for letting me in. I'll try and attend as many as I can.
You'd be very welcome, Deputy.
It's an area close to my heart, so if I can get in, I will. Thank you.
I can see that. You'd be very welcome.
Yeah, thanks.
Rory, do you want anything else?
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, anything I've been offered, I've never refused it, no matter what, Yeah. So thank you very much for providing me with this opportunity. No, but outside of that, in fairness, I think this was a very worthwhile engagement. And here, Mick, I get that idea as well of just reinforcing the point that there has to be real engagement with young people, as opposed to, as I say, me and Deputy Gannon, and for me, even remembering back further when I was young. You know, I'm not sure how representative I was of anybody then, anyway. But in fairness, Deputy Toole had mentioned it as well. Look, I've seen a fair amount of youth projects and youth workers, and see some of the work that works best is when you've really good relationships, whether it is with the youth diversion projects, and in some level, whether you're talking about the team project in Rachael Moore, or you're talking about the house in Cox's, you've multiple projects working out of them. And everybody is aware, and then you have multiple referrals. It's not just those coming through from the cars, and obviously you're now dealing with kids at an earlier stage, and you're seeing some element of success. I would say not enough resources, you know, combined with everything else you need, and the family support. So I would just ask you about your own engagement, be they with as I say, agencies or other projects, some of which could be, like, as I say, justice funded projects and what have you. And I suppose it's us coming up with what is best practice, and that we can have this in as many places as possible, because I think that's what's necessary. It's just not youth work as a silo on its own.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, first of all, as a National Youth Council of Ireland, we're a representative body, so obviously there's member organisations that we serve. But you know, my experience and understanding would be that actually that's something that's developed quite organically on the ground. In many cases, you have youth organisations and youth service providers who are the hosts for, in some cases, the Garda Youth Diversion projects, and there are various different networks that go on, including, you know, the most recent community safety partnerships, where youth work providers and others would come together. I mean, in terms of models, I don't know if there is one set model, because a lot of it is relationship based, professional relationships, and, you know, where you have long established relationships in local communities between.
You can also have catch-all, where you have everything from you're talking about school meals nearly being provided, you know what I mean, for kids before and afterwards. Like, sorry, breakfast club was the term that just escaped me. From right through to youth diversion, and even in some cases even probation at a distance. And not that I want to focus on justice, but you know, you have a whole pile of and just you can see the success. But again, more better.
Look, I mean, it's no surprise to anyone here that the most successful interventions are based on that quality of collaboration. And some areas in the country and in the city are fortunate enough in some respects to have, you know, lots of those services available at their disposal, and people in those services who are keen and willing to work together. In other areas, particularly rural areas, there mightn't be as many options, which is something I suppose we'd be mindful of. But generally speaking, it is that local context that's specific to that area, depending on the services that are there. But generally speaking, it would be the position of, youth work and youth work providers, that where at all possible you are working hand in glove with your partners in education services or health services, to deliver better outcomes for young people.
And I know I'm over time, but I'm just going to keep talking.
Within reason, deep in here.
Yeah. Obviously here, and you all said it earlier, right? When you engage, the big thing is it's the complexity of issues. We had Tusla in the Children's Committee earlier, and they would also say, in relation to both themselves and then the organisations they refer into, and we met a number of them in the Children's Committee as well, who said that the amount of referrals from Tusla is through the roof, and the fact is, then you're trying to deal with this, but again, there's that many cases, that much complexity, that many cases where the early intervention didn't happen, that it's actually, there's even a child protection part, never mind the support part in relation to it, because to a degree, it's like you said, you're just holding cases at the minute. So I'm just wondering, across the breadth of, the organisations you're engaged with, would you get that sense as well? As I say, both complexity and even the Tusla referral type scenario.
Yeah. Well, I would say yes. It is absolutely the case that increased complexity has resulted in probably more child protection referrals. It's also the case that
and also it's them relying on the community voluntary sector, and they said it themselves as much as anything else.
It is, and there's something there about minding professional boundaries as well, and making sure that we are focused on our core work. I mean, this isn't obviously the primary consideration, but when you make a referral out of concern for a young person, you are sometimes taking the risk that actually that may jeopardise the relationship of that family with the service. And you're thinking, if I do this, potentially this may lead to that family pulling back from the service, and then depending on what TUSLA's in a position to provide or not, they may be without service intervention.
And it's grand if it's a support rather than...
Deputy, I'm going to have to stop. I'm very conscious here. Witness has been there for 2 hours, so within that I probably do have to bring it to a close. Don't hold it against me. So thank you so much for everyone. I think you can see by the enthusiasm of all the members here, how much there is admiration for your work. I hope in the policy document that we deliver at the end of this that you'll see, and that also policy and budgetary suggestions that will make your work a lot easier, and actually match that with our admiration. So thank you so much for coming in and guiding us all with your expertise. Meeting adjourned. The next meeting is 12:30 on the 4th of December, and the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
And there we go. How we sound and bump this up a little bit. Boom. There we go. She coming through loud and clear, hopefully, anyway. So yeah, that was the Joint Committee on Drug Use, focusing on an engagement in substance use and prevention. Jeez, I've already forgotten. Give me a sec, we get back out of there. Oh, there we go. That's better. Engagement on substance use and young people, not prevention. That was it. Disappointing, very disappointing. There was a lot of really good points being brought up there about community services and all of that, but just really disappointing that the elephant in the room, like prohibition, the problem that prohibition puts in place for young people at risk. It's mind-boggling how in the name of God do they almost have 2 hours of conversation about drug use and young people and not mention that. They brought up drug intimidation. What else was there? Jeez, I have a lot of notes written down here about it. Hopefully make a couple of shorts out of this, trying to get little sound bites. But a lot of the sound bites are going to be kind of negative and upsetting. Like they make good points there about community services and funding and all of that, but they're just missing that one massive elephant in the bloody room. Yeah, it's true, Chantal. They're just talking loops, repeating the same old stuff. Service providers always kind of just crying out for more funding, highlighting the fact that the services are kind of concentrated in places like Dublin, Cork and stuff like that, and there's very little out there in the rural communities. Yeah, I will say, I'll give the committee credit where it's due. To when the Minister with responsibility for the National Drug Strategy was it last week or the week before? She did get a bit of a grilling. She was put in an uncomfortable position where she talked about harm reduction and a recommendation by the Citizens' Assembly. But she quite conveniently excluded the decriminalisation of the drug user within that. She kind of talked about harm reduction, health-led, but she was called out for it, and rightly so, and you could see the pressure she was kind of put under. She was ducking, dodging, diving, doing everything she could to kind of evade directly answering that question, which it doesn't give me much faith really in the current government, the current policymakers. I wish it wasn't the case. I think there's stuff going on there within Europe. One of the guys within the CBD industry was chatting to me, and he reckons that there's going to be maybe changes made within the European Parliament that could have an effect there on how the cannabis plant is seen. But who knows? But he says that's not going to be till late 26 or maybe even 2027. So I just really hope, I'm going to be optimistic. I'm not going to lose hope, and I hope you don't lose hope out there either. But I'm going to be really optimistic that, with Gary Gannon there chairing this, with some open-minded people there within the committee as well. There was a couple of TDs there. Was it Maria Sherlock? Is that her name? She seems to have a good head on her shoulders. Asked some really good questions, kind of in the right direction there in regards to prohibition and all of that stuff, and the need to decriminalise the drug user. So we will hold out some hope that this report by this committee is going to be just building off the back of the previous committee's report, the Citizens' Assembly, which both kind of included calls towards the decriminalisation of the drug user. And if I can remember, was the last drug committee or committee's drug report, did it talk about cannabis, the need for maybe regulation of the cannabis market, or is that just something I'm misremembering? That happens to me from time to time. Chantal, yeah, they all agreed last year the push for legalisation, and still no mention yet. They love talking shit. Yeah, they do absolute shite there to be spinning. I believe it was last year you were talking about, was that the election? Micheál Martin and all even came out and mentioned drugs policy and even cannabis. So they were desperate for votes. That's all that was, because as soon as they got re-elected and they go back in, it's just like, well, cannabis, drugs, what? Yeah, that's not my. Do you know, we need more housing, we need more jobs. Do you know, and drugs? No, drugs are bad again. Conveniently so for them. They've just been spinning these yarns for so long about, drugs are bad, and their criminalisation efforts are being worthwhile, and kind of quoting numbers and cases, criminalisation cases as being successes. No, that's not the case at all. Not at all. But yeah, massive thing there. The resources, under-resourced, not enough of them, even out there in the rural areas. Again, a massive elephant in the room is the fact that the cannabis industry is worth fucking billions. It is. I threw the question out there, and Chantal said millions. It's definitely worth hundreds of millions. In regards to tax revenue that could be used to fund these fucking resources, these very same resources that could catch those who are at risk at a young age from actually developing addictions, and they can grow to be a right age where they can be an adult and make a conscious, a well-informed, conscious decision for them then. Do you know, they're in, what would you say, not an at-risk position, because young people right now who are at risk are even further at risk because of the fact that the drugs that they're at risk from are illegal. It's just, oh my God, it's insanity that these policymakers can't understand that and like, you know, voice that, especially within these fucking committees that are focused on drug use and young people. Oh, God. Oh, my God. So bloody frustrating. And thank God I have a bowl packed here. Geez, last Thursday, you know, as this meeting goes on, kind of hitting a couple of bowls going through just to help deal with the stress of the complete ignorance that you be witnessing. But geez, I went in to begin cooking the dinner, and geez, the munchies kicked in quite bad. It's dangerous when you're in the kitchen and you're doing your bits and pieces cooking, and you know there's a cupboard there filled with all sorts of goodness. Oh, but today I'm going to be better prepared. We got some healthy snacks, healthier options to snack and munch on while we get dinner ready. Ooh. Oh, what's been said in the hot box? Johnny Regan says, I've been following the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control at the COP. It's incredible, but the disinformation is the name of the game. Oh yeah, it's incredible, but disinformation is the name of the game. Yeah, they spout on about this information and misinformation and the need for more online accountability of people and of these tech industries. But meanwhile, like, even them, they've no need, no desire to hold themselves as policymakers accountable at all. Like, Jesus Christ, look at your man Pascal Donoghue. Like, if you've been in the dark about what goes on in the Irish government, well, this guy Pascal Donoghue, he was the Minister for Finance, and he recently retired, or he quit. He basically quit because he was offered a nice job. Guess where? As the Minister for Finance, his new position is within the World Bank. The World effing Bank. It's insane. Like, if memory serves correct, I believe that last guy, Bertie Ahern, you remember that guy? I imagine many of you will remember that name. He was involved with Cuilta, wasn't it? Or Forest State Agency, that thing. If memory serves correct, didn't he retire out of that when he left government under, you know, under investigation or whatever that was going on. You know, he was a Minister for Finance with no bank account as well, wasn't it? But I believe he went into some fucking European forestry gig afterwards. Like, our government is corrupt as hell. It's insane. There's no accountability there, but meanwhile they want a complete accountability over us, you know. Going to be controlling how many fags we can smoke there now in the future, you know, because you're carbon. And if you're rich, you can buy more carbon credits and you can smoke more fags. Jerry, good afternoon, or is it good morning to yourself across the pond? Hi Martin, I heard about one of the legalised states in the US where overproduction left the prices very low, $30 an ounce, I think. Yeah, like, I've no surprise that that's happening. There's people get into the industry because of its where it's at, because of prohibition, and they believe that the price is going to stay there. But it doesn't, you know, when you've got a controlled, regulated industry where people have an opportunity to come in and compete. Competition is key there, competition. Legal, regulated industry where you have competition. And competition is going to drive innovation, it's going to drive quality as well, hopefully. Quality and price. Price comes down and quality goes up. Those who are cheaper and higher quality are going to kind of be the ones who'll sail on through. Sometimes people will go for cheaper, do you know, like some McDonald's. Do you know, you have the McDonald's, or would you say you have the Five Guys, you know? And that's of the fast food industry. And then you can go to, you know, to your 5-star Michelin restaurants. That's what's going to happen in the cannabis industry. But those guys who are at the what would you say, like the higher, because like you look at McDonald's, you look at the Five Guys, they've got a lot more footfall. Those Michelin star restaurants, it's limited, boutique. But yeah, it's no surprise. And a lot of that then, $30 an ounce, what happens there? A lot of that's going to be exported. You're going to have lads who are going to take the chance of exporting it from there to Ireland. I believe there was a lady, Elizabeth Locke was her name. I believe she was a mother and kind of down on her luck, fell into financial difficulties because of a loss of a job, I believe because of health issues. And she was maybe talked into, because of her in her vulnerable, desperate situation, she was talked into bringing a suitcase full of cannabis to Ireland. I don't know, was it about 100 grand's worth of cannabis? Again, forgive me, Elizabeth, for not... Boom, let's bang this up. Woman jailed for 2.5 years for importing €500,000, so €500,000 worth of cannabis. So if you look in the description of the show, I've included a free Elizabeth Locke as one of the hashtags since I came across the story. Where are we? Boom, there we go. Woman jailed for 2.5 years for importing €500,000 worth of cannabis. Like, vulnerable, they keep talking about vulnerable people in regards to addiction, vulnerable people. And in doing that, then they exclude those who aren't vulnerable, those who have used drugs, substances in a non-problematic way. And also then these at-risk people, who fall into, as I said, financial difficulties, desperate situations. And they see an opportunity, offered, must have been a big suitcase. No, it's just that the value of cannabis here is insane. Like you're saying $30 an ounce over there, so what's that? $30, 300 by 5. So 3.5 for a kilo, so that's 2.2 pounds, isn't it? A kilo, 2.2 pounds, so about, and you're going to get discount, buying in bulk. If you're getting 30 an ounce, you're probably getting that for about 2.5 grand if you're 2.2 pounds a kilo. Guess how much it's going to be here? Like they value it, Gardaí value it here, or cops value it at €20,000 a kilo. So there you go. I think what she have, like 25 kilos or something like that, 30 odd kilos. Forgive my maths on the bunks. 30 vacuum packed bags of cannabis. It's a vacuum packed as well, squished to death. But anyway, the point being, like, prohibition is even in places where the prohibition has been lifted, you now put people at risk because of your prohibition over here. Your ignorance in this country, our government's ignorance in this country has been putting vulnerable people at risk in your country needlessly. Do you know, the same thing was happening in Thailand as well. People travelling over to Thailand, getting super cheap cannabis and bringing it back here where it's sold at for a fortune. And imagine like this cannabis coming from Canada, they're going to put it in a bag and they're going to say it's Cali. Oh, it came all the way from California by, and they're going to sell that even more. The cops are valuable at 20, but when it's sold as Cali, it's probably about 40. Oh, madness, absolute madness. But yeah, free Elizabeth Locke. Jerry Plays says, I already gave the World Bank 140 million before he left. Yeah, he did, 140 million, a 30% increase in Ireland's contribution or something along those lines to the World Bank. And he left for 600,000 a year. Like that was the figure. No, that wasn't, that eluded me. But 600,000 a year, sorry. And I'd imagine that comes with bonuses and all sorts of perks, Good Lord, as if like being a TD wasn't lucrative enough, these boys, and the sailing off into the sunset after absolutely riding the Irish country, Irish people into the ground. Didn't even put a saddle on our back while we're doing it, just raw dogless. Lad. But look, as I said, let's go back to our optimism. Let's hold hope. Better times ahead. Yep, obviously the cops will put the highest price they can find for it to make their catch look bigger. Yeah, they do. They value it at €20 a gram. So if you get caught with, like, let's say 5 grams of cannabis, they're going to value that at €100. If you got caught with 1,000 grams of cannabis, guess what? It's still €20 a gram. They don't account for bulk discount. Over in the UK, they do. Interesting, something I learned while campaigning as an activist. They value bulk less. So if you get caught with a personal amount, it's going to be charged a little bit more by the gram. But if you get caught with a load and they're charging with dealing over in the UK, they actually reduce the value of the amount. So fair play to them. Not that they're any good country to be looking at, given all that's going on over there at the moment. Crazy. Crazy times, but still apparently the best time to be alive ever. For recorded human history anyway, at least. In regards, just in case people are wondering, apparently there's more people out of hunger, less people starving today, and more people have electricity. So that's what that one's about. Someone out there screaming, the fucking world is going to end by and you're saying it's grand. There's a lot of crazy shit going on, but it's still grand. Anything else crazy, interesting there to add to the hot box? I'm going to blaze another bowl. If you keep me interested here for a bit longer, you might get another bowl out of me. Otherwise, I'll be making my way in there within the next couple of minutes. Don't know if Chilbert is out there, but Chilbert, the Exodus crossed with Psychosis again, is making the menu today. Mighty fine strain, getting compliments from all those who've tasted it too. So, credit to the chef. The bong hits, they're just too convenient. I got myself a venti. I've been meaning to move away from the combustion for quite a while. Made a couple of attempts, but goddamn, the habit of hitting the bong is just it's just too convenient. It's just there, hit it and forget it. And to find the venti, the vapes are just a bit more commitment in regards to the amount of time that you're going to be spend getting your hit. Enjoyable though, but tasty. Definitely good for a social situation where you're kind of sitting around and got a bit more time to enjoy it. Mentioned Chilbert there. Chilbert, hope you don't mind me throwing you up there, boy. Hopefully the Insta's logged in. It is. High Craft Organics, isn't it? Maybe get it on your personal. Here we go. If you're over on the Instagram and if you're looking for more cannabis content producers, this is a guy to give a follow. Puts up some great cannabis content. High Craft Organics, I was right there on that. He's put out some really nice strains. So this one up here is Killer Cherry. Look at that. Ooh. Killer Cherry. And look at this, like, there's an absolute top description here. It's definitely a lot more descriptive than some of the other seed producers that I've seen out there to date. An old school soul crossed with modern organic craft, Cherry Killer brings the charm of classic English sweets mixed with that signature skunk bred and cultivated by Chilbert. It's a true example of high craft UK organics. So there you go, that's just like one example of what's going on out there. Like, this is being produced over there in the UK. Fair play to Chilbert doing this underground like you can see there, like quite a number of plants. When you're going to be putting out breeding seeds, you're going to be looking for phenos. In order to find phenos, in order to stabilise genetics seeds, it's going to take quite a few plants, quite a bit of space, quite a bit of risk. So credit to where it's due there to those out there doing that, taking those risks. I believe in places where cannabis remained illegal, but there was a lot of this going on. There was a lot of strains, a lot of really, really nice cannabis strains lost because of cops coming in, busting producers, breeders like this. I believe, was it UK cheese? Is that one said to be lost? I think, was it saved? Is it still out there? But I heard for a while that it was lost anyway. Could be wrong. What other? New York Diesel. The New York Diesel, apparently that one was lost. At least coming from contacts over there anyway, there's been no good New York Diesel floating around. But yes, Chilbert's got some nice content up there, some really nice flowers for those who appreciate a good picture of a flower. Blue 1 to 5Q blue crossed with red lead puck. Red lead puck. Jeez, that one's a bit of a tongue twister when you got a bit of cotton muck going on. Hash as well, some really nice hash. Can't appreciate some good hash enough. Really can't. We got Sean T. Yeah, man, have a good day. We're going to be signing off there in a couple of seconds anyway. In fact, we might pack one more bowl for the road. We closed the grinder and all, jeez. This proof I really was ready to sign off, but boom. Was there a link to his Highcraft Organic page? No. This is it. To have the freedom to be able to do something like this without the worry, the absolute fear that's put over you of the cops kicking in your door, holding you against your will, treating you like absolute criminals, taking away your hard work, bothering nobody. Do you know? Boy. I have a good buddy of mine, I've mentioned him a couple of times on the show, and yeah, the ganja was a good pathway off, away from alcohol addiction, alcohol abuse. And the same person got into a bit of growing and was quite happy doing so for a couple of years. Then had some new neighbours move in and just felt very uncomfortable because of those new neighbours. New neighbours like to drink quite a bit, and they don't like the smell of cannabis apparently, and they done a lot of complaining and giving out and stuff like that, and he just felt very uncomfortable because of it and stopped growing. Unfortunately, is now back buying, and it's kind of limited in the amount that he's able to buy, but still, nonetheless, you know, he's remained abstinent of alcohol, sober. Still gets enough cannabis to keep that under control, but still has lost that incredible hobby that he enjoyed so much and done so well. And I now down one good grower buddy. But you know, hopefully one day he'll get back at it. Speak now or forever hold your peace, because with that one I will begin to sign off and say goodbye. Love ye and leave ye. Oh, yummy. So I will be back with the next stream of the Oireachtas Committee joint meeting on drug use. That will be the 4th of December, this day next week, at about 12:30. So until then, everybody have a nice week. Stay blessed. Keep it out. Casa, nice one for dropping in. Yeah, happy to have the stream up to get a couple of more eyes on it. The stream seemed to be getting like over 100 views, so hopefully that's just a lot more people that would have went onto the oireachtas.ie. So if that's what that means, happy fucking days. Hard work's paying off. Hopefully you're not working too hard over there on the farm anyway. Keep it. Stay blessed. Bye bye everybody.